Welcome to the first episode of the Heartland Author Podcast in the year 2022. I'm Aaron Apollo Camp. For today's interview, I had the honor of interviewing Sean Tyler Foley, who, among many other things, is the author of The Power to Speak Naked, a nonfiction book about public speaking. I'm here with Sean Tyler Foley, the author of The Power to Speak Naked. Tyler, welcome to the Heartland Author Podcast.
Oh, Aaron, it's my joy and my pleasure to be here. I've been looking forward to this one.
Okay, for the first question, feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Oh, yeah, that's easy. So Tyler Foley, I'm the author of The Power to Speak Naked. I'm a father, a husband, a son, a performer, former child actor, seeker of warm beaches, lover of fine chocolates, and general enjoyer of life.
Okay, your website's About section lists you as the managing director of a company called Total Buy-In. What type of company is this?
Well, Total Buy-In started as a safety consulting firm. It still has a safety consulting branch, but I now am just the managing director of my own company, where I have a team of people who are considerably smarter than me and more talented in safety who run the day-to-day operations, and I just kind of point them in the right direction to go. And I do a lot of training still within the branch, the safety branch, but a lot of the training that I facilitate has focused around public speaking. And subsequently, I have Total Buy-In has branched out, and now a lot of what we're doing is keynote presentations and training on public speaking in general, as opposed to having a specific safety niche.
Well, I enjoyed you mentioning that the people you work with are smarter than you are.
It's the secret to success. I like being the stupidest person in the room. And that means that especially if all I have to do is point the ship in the right direction, I don't need to know how the mechanics of the engine run. But I do like that I get to steer it every once in a while, or at least my team gives me the illusion that I get to steer it. They give me great guidance and great advice, and I think that's one of the things that I've enjoyed the most about the last 5 years in assembling the team that I have currently in place.
Without spoiling too much of your book, what is your book, The Power to Speak Naked, about? From what I understand, it's not about nudity.
No. In fact, it's a direct rebuttal to what is probably the worst advice any public speaker can get, and that is to picture your audience naked. I think that's remarkably ineffective. Oddly perverse and a waste of valuable memory real estate, as my wife would put it. You should be focused on your audience, yes, but you should be there to serve your audience. And so the book is really to empower people to speak the raw, naked truth. One of the things that I believe in is that the thing you're afraid to say is probably what the world needs to hear. And if you can free yourself to be able to speak those truths, you're amazed at the impact that you can have. And so the book is really about being able to speak the raw, naked truth, be able to give a presentation without gimmick, and so give a naked, raw presentation. And for those who really want to delve into it, I do want to empower the world to be so confident in their messaging that they could go up on stage in the Emperor's new clothes and absolutely no one would notice.
Okay. Now, is The Power to Speak Naked a self-published book or a traditionally published book?
The answer is both. Originally, it was self-published. I published it on my own through, Amazon in 2019. And I was speaking at an event in Bend, Oregon, a few months later. And my publisher happened to be in the audience and picked up a copy and had noticed that it was self-published and asked if I would be interested in having a traditional publishing deal. And obviously, as an author, that was the goal. But I was eager to get the book out to print, and so I was picked up by Morgan James. And the lovely thing about that is, unlike when it was self-published, I'm able to go into bookstores now and actually see my book on bookshelves. In fact, I got a message the other day. A friend of mine who lives in a totally different country and city had been in his local book retailer and saw the book sitting on there as a new release and had sent me a picture of it, which was very, very odd to me to see my work on a shelf in a different country. So I was pretty proud of that.
Now, what is your typical writing routine if you have a typical writing routine?
I do actually, but my writing routine is to not write, it's to speak. One of the beautiful things about technology these days is voice to text has become significantly better. And as somebody who's been public speaking for 36 years, it's easier and faster for me to just speak the text than it is for me to write it out. So typically what I'm doing is recording content at least once a day, usually for about an hour, and then transcribing that content and taking the written transcription and then reworking it and processing it to make a little bit more sense out of what I've done, and then I compile that into the books.
Well, that is very fascinating that you use speech to text on a regular basis. I almost never use speech to text unless my wrists start to hurt quite a bit, which would require me to do a lot of typing before I even got to that point.
True. I just find that it honestly it allows me to have my voice on page, because if I was to write traditionally, whether that's typing or handwriting, and when I used to write, you know, on paper, it was I do it with a pencil and legal pads. Something about being able to have your hand free flow with it versus typing. I always preferred that. But I censor myself and I edit myself on the page when I'm writing. And I find that it's easier for me to get it all out speech wise and then start to edit and censor, because every once in a while I speak out a really good gem, but maybe the wording isn't correct. Where if I was to write it traditionally, I'd be constantly censoring and then the gem would never come out. It would be buried in mounds and mounds and mounds of dirt.
Okay, the foreword of your book was written by Gail Kingsbury. Tell our listeners more about Gail and how was working with Gail like?
Working with Gail is probably one of the greatest joys and pleasures I've ever had in my life. Gail Kingsbury is the person who everybody you know knows. As far as public speaking goes, she is the woman behind the scenes of some of the greatest public speaking names that you know, from Tony Robbins to Brian Tracy, Les Brown. She has worked with the giants in the industry, T. Harv Eker. They've all at some point been on a stage she's put together. And to have her endorsement was just an absolute gift and a blessing, because she is one of the hardest working, most dedicated industry professionals I've ever met. Like, that woman knows how to hustle, knows how to put together an event, knows how to promote, and she is just a true joy to work with day in, day out. And I've had the extreme pleasure to be on stage at a few of the events that she's organized, and her passion is obvious, and she does an incredible job of making sure that the audience goes away being served, which aligns very well with what I believe in.
What was your favorite part about writing The Power to Speak Naked, and what was your least favorite part about writing the book?
The same thing, having to write. My favorite part was that I didn't have to do it, that I only had to speak it. My least favorite part was having to then go through and edit and compress everything down. Um, for the first version of it, the self-published one, I think my least favorite part of being published traditionally now is not knowing where the book is at as far as sales go. When it was self-published, it was very clear. Amazon would ping in and say, you have a sale, and I could track it on my own. And now that I'm reliant on reporting on BookScan and the various entities to say where the book sales are, I feel incredibly disconnected from my audience. And that's been a unique and interesting thing for me to have to adjust to, because the book is now significantly more available to a significantly larger audience, and yet I don't know who that audience is anymore, and that's a little new for me.
You actually mentioned an advantage of self-publishing and a disadvantage of traditional publishing that I've not heard anyone mention before. That when you traditionally published your book, you were kind of flying blind as to what your audience is.
Not only that, but you're 3 to 4 months behind what the trend is. So I just got my report for November sales in the beginning of February, and that kind of delay is hard because you don't know how your marketing is doing, what your marketing is doing, particularly for me, because I'm on podcasts 2 to 3 times a day, radio and television once or twice a week. I'm speaking at events once or twice a month. And so I don't, when I'm at an event, I can see the direct impact because we're selling the book from the back of the room. But for the podcasts and the radio and the television, there's a delay from, particularly if a podcast is pre-recorded, there's a delay from recording to your published date. And then once that is aired and is out to the public, there's a delay in finding out if what your message was resonated with anybody and if they ended up buying the book. So it's this weird delay of knowing how your efforts are going. And then you go, oh, now I can see all that stuff I did 6 months ago is currently paying off, where when you're self-published, that feedback is almost instantaneous, and you have a little bit better idea who your demographic is, who's actually purchasing the book. You can get a little bit more metrics that way. So yes, that is a bit of a disadvantage from the traditional publishing side.
Now, I didn't have this question written down, but while we're on this topic, in your experience, what would be an advantage of traditionally publishing your book over self-publishing, since there's advantages and disadvantages to both?
I would definitely say having someone else in your corner backing the book, and the significantly larger reach, as well as just the assumed authority that comes with it. A lot of people are self-publishing these days, and not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just when you have a publisher taking your book to a bookstore or a traditional retailer and saying, this is an author that we're backing, that we believe in, and we would like to have it stocked on your shelf, there's a little bit more professional understanding there. And then they've been in the industry longer, and so they have the ability to do things faster, quicker, cheaper, including some of the PR things. Like I've been in trade publications and had ads put in trade publications that I wouldn't have known of or wouldn't have thought to have done if it weren't for my publisher. So I think there's a reason why they get paid a significant part of the royalties. And it's because of the work that they do to make sure that your book is seen by the general public, which is the whole point. And it takes a lot of the onus off of you as an author and allows you to do what you know what to do, and that is either write or create.
Now, I was in preparation for this interview, I looked up as much biographical information of you as possible, and I found out that you've been active in the motion picture industry, the oil and gas industry, the aviation industry, and you're a former political candidate. Could you elaborate on all of that?
Yeah, what's the famous saying? Jack of all trades, master of none. I've pretty much dabbled in every industry that I could possibly think of. I have a lot of passions. I have a lot of things that I like to do. Even my hobbies are very varied. Like I drum in a band and goaltend in ice hockey. So those are kind of my favorite hobbies. And on top of that, I collect and build Lego. So, the fact that I have a very varied vocational history is not surprising because A, I get bored with things really quickly. I've been performing professionally since I was 6 years old. When you're an actor, you're usually not just an actor, you're doing something else. Some of the things that aren't written in there, I've worked for a geomatics mapping firm. I started my own mapping firm, aerial photography, and that was after working in aviation for one of the largest air carriers in Canada. I've been a pizza delivery boy. I've also been a piano tuner. So you pick the industry. I swear to you, I have done something in it at some point, and it really boils down to I'm always fascinated with how the world works, and I want to know how to do things. So the easiest way to learn is to actually go and do. And so, if I wonder how my house was wired, I phone up my buddy Matt and say, "Hey, can I come be an electrician with you for 6 months?" Yeah.
That is the one of the most varied resumes of anyone I've ever had appear on this podcast so far, to put it mildly.
Well, again, my resume has to be edited almost as carefully as my books because it doesn't all fit in. So it's one of those, what do we want to present and what strengths do we want to highlight today? And what they all have in common, though, every job that I've ever had ever has had some form of public speaking and forward-facing performance nature. Even in aviation, I was the guy that was making the announcements when luggage would come in, because that nobody else wanted to do it, and it allowed me to rapidly advance within my division because I was willing to get on the mic and be helpful to passengers that way.
Now, for one final question, I'm going to pivot to sports here. As I'm recording this episode, the 2022 Winter Olympics is currently ongoing in Beijing, China at the time that I'm recording this episode. And without spoiling any results of this year's Winter Olympics so far, because different countries air different Olympic events at different times on television, if you have a favorite Winter Olympic athlete, who is it?
To be honest, it's not an athlete, it's a team, and that is the Canadian female hockey team. Those girls work so hard, and where I live is one of the main training facilities for the athletes, and I've had the pure joy on a few occasions to be on the ice with a couple of both current and former Olympic athletes, and the dedication that all of them have is awe-inspiring, especially in this particular Olympics. The atmosphere of it is atypical to what an Olympics games are, and I think it is adding to the pressure that those athletes have. And one of my best friends going through high school, and a current business associate, and really just a smart businessman himself, Jason Krause, was a former Olympic bobsleigh captain himself. and he ran one of the sleds. I believe he was in running Canada too. So I've had the privilege, particularly growing up in Calgary, being an Olympic city, to be around Olympic athletes for a long time. So I couldn't narrow it down to just one, or particularly one this year. But I am very, very, very proud, particularly of the women's hockey team. All of those ladies that are currently over in Beijing representing the country.
Obviously, the Canadian women's hockey team has a storied rivalry that is as old as how long women's ice hockey has been in the Winter Olympics, which dates back to 1998, with the American women's hockey team. Now, hockey is not my favorite Winter Olympic sport. I have quite a few others that I like more than hockey. My favorite Winter Olympic athlete is the American cross country skier Jessie Diggins.
Yes, that's an endurance sport too. Like anybody who can cross country ski, like that is not an easy sport. The one that I'm always fascinated by too is ski jumping. Like I don't know how either the men or the women do that. Like that seems terrifying to me. But cross country skiing, or more specifically, I love cross country skiing, but I actually like biathlon more when you combine the skiing with the shooting.
Oh yeah,
like that's a real sport, and something born. One of the things that I like about that sport is I can see where that real world application. That is a sport that was that evolved from a real need for survival, where some of the rest of them are just, how strong are you, how quick are you, how fast are you, where that's a real technique. How quickly can you get around this course, and how accurately can you shoot a gun after an incredible aerobic workout?
Well, I thank you for appearing on the Heartland Author podcast. Tyler Foley, it's been great to have you on here.
Well, Aaron, it was a joy and a pleasure, and I appreciate every opportunity that you provided. I appreciated being able to interview Tyler, and I hope to be able to interview many more authors and others in the writing industry throughout 2022. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write your imagination. Bye for now. You can learn more about me and my book writing projects at authoraac.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter at authoraac. You can also watch videos on the Heartland Author channel on YouTube. Copyright 2022, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of its audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.